What I'm going to look at now is really for the beginners, and it's joining cables and basically different techniques of twisting wires together to put into a BP connector. Step one, of course, would be to strip the wire. Now, some people think it's really cool and fast to strip a wire like this and just slide it off the end there. The problem with that scenario is that it scores our PVC down here, so not my preferred method. So it scores the PVC, there's an indent in it, so I've compromised the insulation material. I would rather maintain the integrity of that insulation material. Sometimes you can actually cut it and you're left with bare conductors, which is not a happy story for the next guy who comes along to work on your work. So to strip a cable, just grab your pliers on the end, put your finger in there, just give it a twist, and it'll usually strip back along those little grooves that are in the cable itself. And we can chop these off. It takes a few seconds longer, but we're left with a nice clean surface here. Now, although I said I don't like to damage the material underneath, some would say then the next logical step would be to use proper strippers for stripping the cable, but I find that I very rarely damage the conductors at all anyway. So like a lot of other guys, I like to just squeeze that, and with a bit of experience you'll feel it. When you go to squeeze the conductor, you'll feel it get firm when you hit the copper, and the idea is to hold the pliers very loosely as you push the insulation off with your thumb, and that way we end up with reasonably well stripped cables and no damage to the conductor in the middle. So I'll finish doing this one, slide it off, and away we go. So when it comes to twisting these wires together, step one would be to lay the cables up side by side so that it's easy to work with them. You'll notice I've also stripped them back quite a long way, and the reason for that, it makes it easier to work with my fingers. I can always cut a little bit off later, so I'm going to wrap those around each other. Notice that these conductors have also become untwisted, and that's part of the game. By having them untwisted, when they twist together, they'll twist together nice and neatly as we go there, and then all it takes, just a gentle twist. When I go to nip those up, I'm actually pulling. I'll exaggerate that for you. I'm pulling. It's not so much a squeeze and twist, because that'll bulk up the space under the screw. I'm pulling as I just nip it up, and then I can trim it off nice and neat. Now that will leave that end there a little bit wide, so just a little bit of a nip, just slip that on. Now when I'm doing up the connector, another little trick, a lot of guys do this without even thinking about it. As I do this screw up, I'm actually feeling it in my fingers a little bit, slightly wobbling it, so that that screw beds in and it ends up being nice and tight. In my early days I used to give these a little bit of a wriggle and then another nip, just to make sure that they're well and truly tight and that won't come off. That way, you know, we can massage these and that's not going to come out. To twist 3 wires together, pretty much the same process. I'm going to lightly twist those, line up those insulations. I'm not twisting them quite as tightly as I would if there were just 2. Then I'll bring in that 3rd one, place it next to the others and hold that firmly, and basically just run that around the outside, following exactly the same path. Find a groove between the other 2 and run it into that groove. Then I can just very gently sweep those out with my pliers, and then near the end we'll nip it up the same as we did before, chop that off. Now I know this is an earth, or it's coloured earth, but I'm still putting it into a single screw. Technically it should go into a double screw. but you get the job, you get the idea. So let's have a look at 4. Start by exactly the same as before, gently twisting them. Then we're going to bring in another one and place its insulation lined up with the others. Run it around with the first 2. Then bring in the third one and take it to, notice I'm holding those so they don't go anywhere. I'm going to drop that into the other side, and then we'll run that around the groove that was on the opposite side. So now we've got 4 twisted together, and we'll just gently sweep those out. Not too tight, pull firmly, but it's actually more of a just a gentle sweep rather than a twisting around firmly. So I'll make these to go into a 2-screwed connector, so I'm cutting it longer. You'll notice that spread them out and bulk them up a little bit. These are not twisted tightly. They don't need to be twisted tightly. I want to back these screws off until they are invisible in that hole. That hole actually looks a bit small. I'm not sure whether they're going to fit in there. And just massage those in. And away we go. So that's 4 conductors. You'll notice you can see the conductors coming out the other side of that tunnel there. In the old days, that never used to be blocked off. It was open so that you could see the conductors actually come out the other side. These transparent connectors don't need to be done that way. Give that a bit of a wriggle quickly, and we're all fixed, and that's a solid connection with 4 conductors into the 1 connector. Do we try 5? Once again, we're going to choose 2 of them, and we'll twist those, put those insulations together, run them out nice and loose. Then we'll pull in another one, line it up with the first 2, run that out nice and neat, following exactly the same twist rate as the last ones. Bring in another one. That's not behaving how I want it to. Line it up with the other insulations. Lay that around. A lot of this is feel, really. You feel it going around. And the last one, we've now got 5, and they're all following the same path. Check that all those insulations are lined up. You could really hold them there while you do that. And then once again, we're not going to twist them too tight, just nice and gentle, nice and long. And then we'll chop that off. And as you can see, I really need to hold those, because if I let them go, the twist rate is so gentle that they'll just fall apart. So we've got a connector that's already got the screws backed off, and we'll slip that sucker in there if it goes. That's opened up a little bit. Fingertip control. And I can see my conductors coming out the other side there. And we'll do that sucker up. And there we have 5 conductors in the 1 connector.